Good evening and welcome to News Sources on a day when lecturers in public universities have issued a one-week strike notice.
Well, indeed, the lecturers are following the who-to familiar pattern in doctors who have been on strike for more than a month now.
The government appears unmoved by the cries of patients in hospitals, and it appears the media has also well forgotten about the strike.
Well, tonight we are staying matters politics and strikes, but first, the highlights at this hour.
I sentence you for 1 month in jail, suspended sentence, which will fall down. The sentence is hanging on your head.
The whole of the month of March, okay, we are taking health reform forms to the prisons. So doctors will provide free medical services.
I have sacrificed before, I'm ready to sacrifice again.
Good evening and welcome to News Sources. My name is Dennis Onsarigo. Opposition politicians have crossed and started the first step of trying to come together in what they hope is a winning combination for the August fall. NASA, fronted by Raila Odinga, Kalonzo Musyoka, Musalia Mudavadi and Moses Wetangula, hope to have one candidate to face Jubilee's Uhuru Kenyatta. Leaders at the meeting yesterday, there was all this preaching about unity of purpose and togetherness. But the biggest question is, will this hold? Let's take a listen. That's where we're kicking off our discussion tonight. Of course, I'm joined by our very own James Smart. Welcome to the show.
Brilliant.
Ome Thuku, karibu sana to the show. And of course, Nyambega says the last time I saw you was last year.
It was last year, and I'm just happy that today you brought the lecture.
Yes.
Ome Thuku.
So starting with you, Ome Thuku, will this opposition politics hold up until August?
Yes. Are you asking whether they are going to hold? That will be defined by time. And you know, we have a deadline that is in August. We have to hold or split before August. Now, going forward, between now and March, there will be a lot of changes here because when we are in March, that's when any other movement stops as per the law. So yes, I believe they are going to hold. And somehow they have to, because the other side, as they have already said, they are set. Jubilee is set with their candidates for the top positions. So for these fellows, they either hold or split now. If they have to do any splitting, it has to be now, so that they don't confuse their supporters.
The biggest question has been, show us your candidate. We have our candidate. That's what Jubilee has been saying for the last 4 years or so. But is this the time?
No, why do Jubilee need to seek out candidate? They should concentrate on their candidate. The greatest threat, I think, to the NASA coalition is how to balance, the different stakes. Because yesterday we saw at Bombers, and I've seen this thing online, only a few tribes were able to speak. And from where I was watching, I saw Wavinya Ndeti was also there with a party, Chamacha, is it Chamacha Mapinduzi or Chamacha something? She did not get a chance to talk. I also saw that Governor Kivuta Kibwana was there. He did not get a chance to talk for his party. These are some of the willing coalitions to enter into NASA. I also saw that where I come from, of course, you had the Kisi. Kisi is also a big community, although we don't have such a national party. But there was Timothy Wasire, there was Dr. James Gesami, there was the retired Justice.
You're not allowed to speak.
All these guys were not, they did not.
Smart, where does this coalition leave us going forward?
I think Nyambega is worried about, two technical details which will come in the form. I think the opposition are in a place whereby they have to do it. They have to stick together if they stand a chance to fight Jubilee. As Wahome says, Jubilee already has its lineup. It has the candidate and the deputy candidate. It's horses, it's on the track. It's already ready. CORD will not stand a chance if they do not come together and stick together. So I think the second question is, do they find a candidate now or the candidate later, around May or thereabouts? I think the most important thing for them in the next few months is to gel, in my view.
But the only problem that they'll have now is we only have two positions at the very top. We have about 5-6 guys wanting to gun for those positions. Now, what happens? And you see, these are positions which you can't promise to one another. You can't say, I'll become the president, he becomes deputy, then I'll give you these positions. What happens to the others? Do they run for other minor positions, governors here and there, or senators? What do they do? You know, because that is the key question, that someone might miss the boat now and miss it for the next 5 years. So that you're out there in the cold like the prince.
Nyamega Kisuza, there's this talk in town that Musalia Mudavadi will run for Nairobi governorship. Moses Wetangula will still retain his seat as senator.
Yeah, I think Wetangula has been making a lot of noise today. And sometimes as a politician, you need to look at yourself and the kind of following you have. I believe even if Moses Wetangula was given to run as governor in Nairobi, he'll lose. So he needs to understand that it's a codical principle, but it might not be as equal as probably Raila Odinga or Kalonzo Musyoka. As far as Nairobi governorship is concerned, this is one of the seats that the NASA coalition is trying to negotiate with Musalia Mudavadi, whether he can downgrade his ambitions to be Kenya's president so that he can vie for the city of, for the governorship of Nairobi. It also bring a very big challenge because even Dr. Evans Kidero is also very influential within the ODM circles. But like I said earlier on, the most important thing, like if you look at the screen, you see the NASA yesterday, you could think it was more of an ODM rally than more of these other parties come together. So the other players in the coalition need to come forward, need to fight for their space, and need to demand for that space.
Smart. I think the admission is that ODM obviously is a dominant party. It's, I think, the biggest party in parliament right now with more members of parliament than any other. So I think that in its own way, possibly it will be sorted out if we go to the next election, and perhaps Wiper manages to get more candidates outside traditional strongholds, so they have candidates in, say, Coast and in Nairobi and elsewhere, and Ford Kenya managed the same. So I think that is a problem that can only be sorted out in an election. So there is no stopping ODM's dominance now until we go to the election. And the difficulty with that, I think, as what Wahome talks about, is the positions of all these other candidates and what they get is important, and it's a question that they must put to bed very early on so that it doesn't become a sticking point and a problem as we go for the next 5-6 months.
Wahome, where do they leave their supporters? How do they keep them together up until this nomination or this anointing of a flag bearer, as it were?
One thing I know is the supporters are behind them all, so that should they pick one candidate or two, the supporters are likely to go with that one candidate. There's no doubt about that. The problem will be how they will pick that one candidate. And I think the only way they would do it is by virtue of who has numbers here. This is a question of numbers, okay? At the end of the day, some people will say, well, I'm bringing numbers to this coalition, so I don't think you can leave me out of it. So that's how it will be worked out, because there are some people who cannot be supported, they don't have numbers, and they don't have the resources. So how do you now promote them? What do you do with them? But the point you're asking is, what happens to the supporters? If they only get two candidates, then the whole of this multitude would just be behind them. That's clear.
I think, to me, I tend to think that the NASA has already agreed on a candidate. Just that they are trying to probably, spend more time trying to put their supporters together, so that also the Jubilee coalition does not start scheming against that apparent one candidate whom they have already agreed. And from yesterday, you could have seen, if like Wahome Tuku says, that issue about numbers, if it's numbers, then it's just obvious that it's Raila Amolo Odinga. If it's someone who's a gentleman, then that falls to Musalia Mudavadi. If someone who doesn't know what he wants in the coalition, that falls to Wetangula. So,
Smart, is it Raila Odinga or Musalia Mudavadi?
I'll go for the feel safe of what Wahome says today. Today, I quite agree with Wahome. That anyone who's chosen by this coalition has a likely chance to be followed by the entire base. So the question of the candidate, I think it's what, is neither here nor there. They decide and who gets there. But the question of who's the flag bearer for the NASA is, of course, where all the attention shifts to. Many pundits have said it will be next to impossible for the opposition coalition to hold together, since competing presidential interests, especially that one of Kalonzo Musyoka, will be a cause for friction. The Wiper leader told the NASA meeting yesterday he's ready and willing to sacrifice his presidential bid again.
Whoever is going to be the flag bearer will put everything on the table. Everything on the table. I have sacrificed before. I'm ready to sacrifice again.
Well, I've never seen, so many people celebrating a man's downfall like that. This is about his putting down his presidential, ambitions and, celebrating. But here's the point. I think what, former Vice President Kalonzo Musyoka was trying to put there was sort of to, diffuse the frictions. If there were any, that anyone who's coming in, and especially Musalia Mudavadi who's joined the fold, a few months ago, to come in with any ambitions or, any ideas that they can dictate how the conversation goes forward, it's not going to be like that. That this is a place where we are all, putting our...
Smart, my take is that what Kalonzo did was to remind Musalia Mudavadi that number one is gone, but I'm here to stay as number two. And you also must sacrifice. You also must sacrifice. And again, I think Kalonzo Musyoka has sacrificed a lot for this coalition.
Can the country finally get past, the watermelon thing? This is a man who sacrificed. And if he does it again this time, will he get his credentials back?
You see, to me, it was an anticlimax by Kalonzo saying that he's willing to sacrifice because it doesn't seem to show like he has the ambition in him, the fighter spirit. And I think a Kalonzo presidency as Kalonzo with a ticket in NASA can easily beat Uruto. It's a challenge.
I don't know what you meant by saying you put everything on the table. That still left me thinking, what is this that's to be put on the table? Because these coalitions, whether this one or the Jubilee one, they have always had cards, some cards they have hidden under there. And I think that's what he meant by on the table. But Kalonzo, I don't know whether he has anything to sacrifice. To me, and this is my opinion, Kalonzo is not the man who would win a presidential race. But
a minute ago you just said that if he's chosen by the coalition...
Okay. Let me put it this way. I don't think Kalonzo is the man they will pick in this coalition for quite a number of things. I mean, to me, he is a person who will not. Let me just say he will not match up to this.
This is the only show where you're allowed to say what you have to say.
Let me put the point here. The only place he might come in is that if you have Raila Odinga as top, then Musalia Mudavadi may not work well for them. You remember last time when that was the arrangement, Kalonzo Musyoka was a candidate also. Now, you can't have the entire coalition just moving to Western, okay? You can't have it that way. Those are the kind of things I think Kalonzo is saying, that you put things on the table so that they know how to share.
That the current ruling coalition comes from what I can call as the central part of Kenya, where we have Mount Kenya and we have Rift Valley, which comes central. So to me, it will be nonsensical to say that we can't have the coalition moving from Western, because at the end of the day, all these coalitions are fighting for resources, they are fighting for control of this government. And from the voter patterns, from the statistics, it has shown that the only thing that now the NASA people need to tell their supporters is that vote for us. This is how we can have power. This is how we can be able to be in control of resources.
I don't know what you said by saying that Rift Valley is in central. Well,
no, I'm saying the central part.
Central
more
part.
in the central part of Kenya.
Still, if you look at who is and where Ruto comes from, it's quite vast. It's even geographically, it's a distance. So you can't just say that these are poor grouped together.
Let's move it forward, Dennis. In the question of how they narrow down to get a candidate, because that's the elephant in the room. How do these 4 or 5 individuals sit down and put their cards on the table and choose one? What is the magic? What is the formula?
The biggest question will be, who has the numbers? Can I transfer my followers to you, as it were? Raila Odinga has the numbers as it stands now. I think is the most popular among all these people. The rest of them must depend on Raila Odinga for them to become what they want to become. That's a fact. And from where I see it, with or without Mudavadi, Raila Odinga can still get votes from Western Province. But for us to whip the entire Western Province into one
Remember
line,
Musalia Mudavadi went away with 500,000
fine,
votes.
still Raila Odinga got 5.3 million votes.
Well, but imagine if Mudavadi was there with
You
500,000
cannot
votes.
imagine because Musalia Mudavadi left when he was most needed.
Then this is the fact. This is the fact. Just that Raila alone will lose the elections. Mudavadi alone will lose the elections. Kalonzo alone will lose the elections. Wetangula, I don't think he can even be on the presidential ballot paper. And my point is just that we have to look in a coalition building. You don't look for the person who has the majority. You look for the small bits. You look for the small votes. You look for people like Wavinya Ndeti. You look for people like Kivuta Kibwana. You look for people like the Kisii community, so that you're able to galvanize all this support and bring it together.
I don't know how else it would work without Raila as the key man. Okay, even if you look at how they were arranging themselves yesterday, you could see they still recognize him as the man who calls the shots.
But
this
is in politics, they keep the base busy. I mean, keep your people busy. The moment you see this on TV, you feel, my community is represented here. Kalonzo is here, Wetangula is here, everyone is here. But I think at the end of the day, is it possible for these votes to be transferred? There are people who will say, if it is not Raila Odinga, I'm not going to vote.
Is it possible? There's no. I don't believe that there are supporters for Raila Odinga will say that if Raila Odinga is not near the ballot, I'm going to vote for Uhuru.
I'm asking. It's a question I posed to you.
Which a question which I've declined to answer.
Actually, it may work that way. Yes. At the moment, Jubilee is likely to steal voters from this coalition if they don't arrange themselves properly. But we said that if they have two candidates and they don't argue about that, then most of their supporters will be for them. The question as to whether there are people who will defect, that's another.
Let's move on to Jubilee. Miles away, Deputy President William Ruto was meeting Jubilee aspirants in Nairobi. Jubilee says it is houses in order as it awaits their opponents to put theirs together and ready for August battle royale. Jubilee does not have questions about their top positions, but nominations for party threatens to break the ruling party apart. Are we likely to see this going forward? But there's a let's listen to former Starehe Member of Parliament, Minor Commander there.
Ukafikiria ni wewe peke yako. Fikiria ile shinda ambayo Kidero ametuletea Nairobi hii. Watu wetu wanaumia Nairobi hii. Nairobi imemalizika, imeibwa ya kutosha na tumesema enough is enough.
We are delivering Jubilee. We are going to take over Nairobi. We will have a governor, Nairobi, wa Jubilee. We will have a senator, Nairobi, Jubilee. We will have a women rep, Nairobi, Jubilee. We will have MPs and MCAs, Nairobi, Jubilee. That is bigger than all of us who are here.
Mbega.
I think if the Jubilee coalition, if they went, the Jubilee party have never done elections. If you went to an election, the party could have been done. It will be over by now. And I think in Nairobi will test Jubilee so much because one of the reasons why the deputy president called on that meeting was to solve on the issue on who is going to vie for the governorship in Nairobi. Of course, there's the Dagoretti South MP, Dennis Waweru, there's Peter Kenneth, there's water minister, Omalwa, and then there's Bishop, and there's Mike Songo. I can also there's Sakaja. And whatever happens in Nairobi might kind of give an example of what is going to happen in Jubilee all over the country. And I think it will break.
Well, William Ruto says this coalition that came together yesterday is a group of losers who did the same thing in 2013 and they still got defeated. Is he blowing hot and cold on this?
Yeah, well, losers or no losers, 2013 was an election. 2017 is another election, okay? Even they themselves lost with Uhuru Kenyatta some time back. And they still won later on. So that's not the issue. Now, they have candidates because Jubilee is already in power. There was no way they were not going to have candidates already set. The questions now about them having two candidates at the top, that's resolved. Now, these are the characters who are running for these other seats. That is where the rubber meets the road. Because we will have one governor. Now, we have about 10 or 12 candidates in Jubilee. all of them power hungry. And that's why Shebesh is telling them we will have a Jubilee governor here. We don't know. It might be a NASA governor. But for the time being, we have these guys who want this seat. You either have it or lose it. There are no two ways. There is no fallback. So that's the problem that they are going to have.
Smart, there's a feeling in Central Province that leaders are being whipped and herded like cattle to make sure that they either join a Jubilee party or they've lost it. I mean, Peter Munya is one of them. We're saying, I can't run on Jubilee party, I'll run on a PNU party. Where does this leave support for the ruling coalition?
I think this nomination thing would be a fallout for the political leaders. It will be a problem for them. But in terms of what they choose nationally, I don't think that has any bearing in the fact that their supporters in both Rift Valley and in central Kenya are likely still to support Uhuru Kenyatta and William Ruto. What they'll have problems is in who they elect as a governor, senators, MPs, among others. Some have argued that that could sort of contribute in voter apathy in a way. We don't know that yet. We can only speculate until and unless that happens. They point out to Raila Odinga and what happened in Nyanza when the nominations went horribly wrong, that Ford Kenya and other parties managed to sort of get seats. There was people who just went to vote for Ford Kenya and didn't vote for the presidential candidate. So that is, something that is, wait to see.
The most interesting
Nyambega,
thing...
I mean, I'll hold you to that. Nyambega, listening to what Smart is saying, are you saying that the noise by Isaac Ruto in Rift Valley, in Bomet County, is just noise? At the end of the day, all these supporters will vote still for Uhuru Kenyatta and William Ruto?
This is one kind of advice I'll give to the NASA, the NASA commanders, that they need to concentrate first on where they can be able to have more support than just looking at the South Rift. The South Rift is good for propaganda, but I don't think that most of them might end up voting for the NASA coalition. And like Smart has said, that there's something here very important we have to note. Jubilee as a party might break during the nominations, but they'll still vote for Uhuru presidency. The difficulty with the NASA coalition is that if these guys, there's a lot of competition, of course they'll divide and they might not vote for the NASA presidential candidate.
Wahome, before we move on to something else in 10 seconds or less, are we done with this? Show us your candidate. We already have ours. Are we done with this?
We're done with Jubilee candidates.
Yes.
NASA, they have up to March. Okay? They have up to March or just about then, because at that point in time, once they don't show us a candidate, they'll have to be in specific parties. Failing which, now you lose because you can't defect anymore. So that's the point at which...
All right, and staying with that, mass voter registration starts Monday. IEBC will be hoping to add millions of new voters into the voter register. Both CORE and Jubilee are lining up to push for voter mobilization. CORE wants nothing less than a biometric voter registration. Is the IEBC ready for the task ahead, Dennis?
I have no idea, Smart. I mean, election officials are not even in office. You have a functioning secretariat. I think the head is not there. The head is likely to join the rest of the body, I think, next week. Voter registration kits, some are malfunctioning. I don't know how they're going to pull off this.
But as we grapple with these issues, let's talk about also the numbers question. The last election was defined by, someone just looking at the entire, people who registered and said there are more Uhuru Kenyatta voters than there are Raila Odingas, and that was it. And the election was won on that pretext. Do we still have that sort of narrative sort of playing out that after 3 weeks, we're going to say we have more voters than you and the election is over and done with?
I've keenly analyzed the voter patterns and the voter statistics in Kenya. And for the first time in this country, we have the opposition controlling more voters, more voters. But the problem is that most of the voters, the opposition, this NASA coalition will work on the premise of 24 counties. They have selected 24 counties and they want a majority in these counties. The problem is that there are so many new eligible voters who are still not registered. For instance, if I come from Nyamira County, we have about 192,000 new eligible voters who have not been who have not yet registered.
Mohammed, where you come from, there's no this problem. I mean, there's no voter apathy and people registered.
They did
I've said before here that voter apathy will be defined by what those already in power have done for the people. A lot of people, where I come from, which is in central Kenya here, people will not be saying we are not going to vote because we have been told by the opposition or something like that. The opposition there has no much influence. It is about this government, what this government has delivered, what it promised, what it did not deliver. That is what will define voter apathy. But as we go to the registration of voters, towards the end of the month, next month, that is when you'll start seeing how the numbers are defined. Because right now the campaigns are on to start to put people on the ballots, on the voter register. But after that, what do you do to make these people go to the polling stations? That's the biggest
issue on the issue of voter registration. And I think there should be a wake-up call to the NASA guys. Every weekend in Central, in parts of Eastern, in parts of even Kalenjin land, you will see roadshows of various aspirants. Like I can quote a number of times I've seen this Irongo Kangata is vying for senator in Murang'a. I've seen Akina Kabogo, Akina even this is his enemy, this political enemy. This one throw was in Nairobi. Waitito. I've seen all these guys moving in trucks, each and every time mobilizing. If you go to the opposition, other than in the coast areas, it's not happening. It's not happening. The only count is happening in Ilo Nyanza, mostly in Homa Bay. It's not happening in Kisi. It's not
what
happening
if it
in
happens this time, Nyambega? What
have they been waiting? Up to this time, and this is the question I'm asking. What have you been waiting? You have been waiting for someone to blow a whistle for you to start voter registration. So this is the biggest question.
So what are you asking? What will happen if what?
What will happen if there is this massive voter turnout?
Voter
registration turnout, yes, in opposition strongholds. Yeah.
But they are not doing enough for us to see the possibility of that. The leaders are not doing enough.
We won't know yet until we're done with the process.
We have a whole 1 month to go to register voters. And that's the most critical. Because this month comes at a point where you register your voters knowing what exactly you want with them. Because time is very limited.
Okay. Indeed, time is very limited for us. We must take a break. But before we do, we're asking you tonight, do you think the court was in order to sentence union officials in the ongoing doctor strike? Do you think the court was in order to sentence union officials in the ongoing doctor strike? You can tweet me at Dion Sarigo, at KTN Kenya, at KTN News, at James Smart. We're taking a short break, but we will be back shortly.